I'm very confident everything's okay. It's your first time, so just in case.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will not miss me.
Yeah. Give me 2 seconds and I'll quickly. Andreas, are
Yep.
you okay?
Dear friends, please take your seats. We'll be starting the session shortly. Please take your seats. Good morning. I call the meeting of the General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions to order. Colleagues, the agenda for this meeting has been distributed. Could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections? I see no objections, so the agenda is adopted. May I remind you, dear colleagues, that the election of committee officers for the next annual session of the Assembly will take place during the committee's final session, which is due to take place on Monday morning. As agreed yesterday, nominations for candidates for election should be handed in to the table office no later than 6 p.m. on Sunday afternoon, that is today. In the second meeting, we will consider amendments to the draft resolution from Rapporteur Mr. Buzër. Time permitting, we will then consider the first supplementary item on adopting effective mechanisms to safeguard Ukrainian women and children from abuse, exploitation, and human trafficking. But it depends on us how effectively we will use the time. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 24 valid amendments have been tabled, and the copies of the amendments have been made available. In discussing amendments, I will call the proposer of the amendment first, and then will call an opponent of the amendment. I will then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution for his opinion. That is Mr. Buzër. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. I ask speakers to observe a time limit of 1 minute. We're also required to vote on every paragraph to which there are no amendments. I hope the rules are clear. If anybody has any question, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, we will move to discussion of the paragraphs. All right, now we will take paragraphs 1 to 2 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? No? So we will take paragraphs 1 to 2 together. Anyone against? In favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 1 to 2 agreed. Now I call Ms. Bartusz from Poland to propose Amendment 1 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 2.
The amendment shows the impact on democracy, human rights, and the humanitarian issues of Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine. It commends Russia for its aggression and calls on Russia to stop the war and to withdraw its forces from Ukraine. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 1? Mr. Buser, your opinion of the amendment?
I agree with the amendment.
I shall now put Amendment 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 1 please raise their voting cards? Before you raise your voting cards, please consider only these cards are valid. No other color is valid. Are there anybody against? Any abstentions? Amendment 1 is adopted. Amendment 2, I now call Mr. Cohen from the United States to propose Amendment 2 to paragraph 3. No?
Anybody against?
Anyone wish to speak against Amendment 2? Mr. Buser?
I agree.
I shall now put Amendment...
Does he want to speak?
Who?
Cohen, I think, will speak in the end.
Thank you, sirs. I was a little late. I do move adoption. The amendment would concerns Ukraine and the Russian Federation's war against Ukraine, and it adds the language aided and abetted by Alexander Lukashenko and his illegitimate regime in Belarus. As we all know, he has 1,500 prisoners, political prisoners, that were taken because they protested what was clearly an illegal election. The man who was running for president was arrested and is still in jail. His wife then ran. She's in Lithuania now, Ms. Svetlana Tikhanoshkova. And I just ask that we add this amendment because Belarus is definitely a part of it.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 2 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 2 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Any abstentions? Anyone against? No. Amendment 2 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 3 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions?
Is that an abstention?
What?
Clarify. Did you say abstention again?
Abstention?
One abstention.
Paragraph 3 as amended is agreed. Paragraphs 4 to 7, we will now take them together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? No. So we'll take them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 4 to 7 are agreed. Amendment 3. I now call Mr. Wilson from the United States to propose Amendment 3 to insert a new paragraph before paragraph 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians. It is crucial and significant that we start the section of the resolution keeping in mind the subtitle the rapporteur has chosen by bringing to our attention the original cause and the long-term solution to the suffering of the people of Ukraine. Sadly, the cause, of course, is war criminal Putin's war and occupation of the Ukrainian territory. Putin himself can end this genocidal war in a moment, yet refuses to do so. And while we work to help Ukrainians with aid and military support, we must bear in mind our concrete goal: expelling Putin completely from Ukrainian territory to achieve territorial integrity. Sadly, war criminal Putin is sacrificing young Russians for the benefit of himself, as a benefit of oil, money, and power, for Putin himself, against the interests of the Russian people. When the day comes, recovery will not be instant. Even so, we can be confident that restoration and real peace will only come with Ukrainian victory. I urge that you support this important reminder of these essential facts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No. Mr. Boozer?
I think Mr. Wilson argumented very well, so I agree with the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I shall put the Amendment 3 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 3 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Any abstentions? Anybody against? Thank you. Amendment 3 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 8. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 8 is agreed. Now we come to amendment number 4, and I call Mr. Fessler from Switzerland to propose amendment 4, to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 8.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, die Zivilbevölkerung wird bei bewaffneten Konflikten immer weniger verschont. Lebenswichtige Infrastrukturanlagen wie Wasser- oder Elektrizitätsanlagen, Einkaufsmärkte oder Lebensmittellager werden gezielt angegriffen und zerstört. Sogar vor Angriffen auf Schulen oder Spitäler wird nicht zurückgeschreckt. In der Ukraine wird jeden zweiten Tag eine Schule bei russischen Angriffen zerstört. Dabei werden nicht nur Sachwerte vernichtet, meistens werden bei diesen Menschen getötet, andere schwer verletzt. Und vor allem, man nimmt damit den Kindern und Jugendlichen auch die Hoffnung auf eine Zukunft im eigenen Land. Nicht aus Versehen, sondern generell gezielt mit voller Absicht. Das humanitäre Völkerrecht verlangt, dass die Zivilbevölkerung geschützt wird. Und wir von der OSZE müssen alles tun, um unser Engagement zum Schutz der menschlichen Würde, der Zivilbevölkerung und zur Eindämmung von Verletzungen des humanitären Völkerrechts in bewaffneten Konflikten weiterzuführen. In diesem Sinne bitte ich Sie, meinem Änderungsantrag zuzustimmen. Besten Dank.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 4? We have Ukraine and Lithuania requesting the floor, so I'll ask Ukraine to take the floor.
Dear parliamentarians, we protect that to put in one side all parties of the aimed conflict, because there are no all parties. There are aggressor state, terrorist state, and the victim of the war, Ukrainian people. So we call to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boozer? Yes, please.
Thank you. My proposal is a little bit different of Ukrainian. I think this amendment, in principle, I'm not against it, underlines the importance of respect for international humanitarian law. And it's very, very important. But if I may, I can suggest to withdraw some words. It would be as oral amendment. And instead of all parties to the armed conflict, this is not conflict, this is aggression, yeah? To withdraw all parties to the armed conflict, and instead of it, put urges Russian military forces to ensure, and as followed. This night, after 12 days break, Russia heavily attacked Kiev. There are casualties, civilian casualties, not military casualties. And if we will write that all parties are doing the same, it's a lie. And I would vote for this amendment. It's important if only these words about all parties of the armed conflict would be withdrawn.
We'll suspend for half a minute. Dear friends and colleagues, in accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, the oral sub-amendment cannot be considered if there are any objections to it. So, is there any objection to the oral sub-amendment being considered? Switzerland is objecting. So the oral sub-amendment from Lithuania cannot be considered. Now I ask Mr. Buser what is the opinion of the original amendment.
Originally, I was going to accept the proposed amendment, but after hearing the discussion in here in the plena, and also I think that Vilja's proposal, the Lithuanian representative, had a very good proposal. So there, and I'm sorry that the Swiss didn't accept this, but my suggestion is that we don't accept this amendment from the Swiss delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 4 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 4 please raise their voting cards?
I think that's fine.
Will all those against please raise their cards? Any abstentions? Amendment is defeated. We'll now vote on paragraph 9. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph is agreed. We come now to Amendment 5, and I call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 5 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 9.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let everyone know that There are two amendments that may sound very similar, but this one tells us that we would like everyone to be supportive and not to discriminate against refugees and forcibly displaced persons, and to adopt policies to prevent gender discrimination and to prevent refugees and displaced persons from not having access to services such as housing and accommodation and mental health supports. So this is asking that we ensure that displaced persons are not discriminated against because of any of their differences. And this is really what I'm trying to ask for in this amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 5? No. Mr. Boozer, your opinion?
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Fry's proposed amendment. Thank you.
I shall now put Amendment 5 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 5 please raise your cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your cards? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 5 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 10. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 10 is agreed. Amendment number 6. I call again Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 6 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 10.
Thank you, Chair. This particular amendment speaks specifically to the issue that during conflict, many women and children, especially women, are sexually violated. There is violence against them because of their gender, particularly, and we need to make sure that they have access to all of the sexual and reproductive health services that they need, whether it is to be prenatal care, postnatal care. Many of them have come and are pregnant, just normally pregnant from Ukraine. They need that kind of care. And those who have been violated need access to safe abortion if they have been violated by a Russian soldier. And I think this is a form of violence that's absolutely reprehensible, and we need everyone to put financial support, not just say we support, but we need to actually put real action into our support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No one? Mr. Boozer?
I agree.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 6 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 6 please raise your cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your cards? Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 6 is adopted. We will now move to paragraph 11, and we'll now vote on paragraph 11. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 11 is agreed. Amendment number 7, I call Ms. Moore from the United States to propose Amendment 7 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 11.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Moore has asked me to offer that amendment. This amendment's in keeping with the spirit of the previous two amendments, basically on non-discrimination of people based on race, and particularly African Americans. It commends all of the countries that have done such an outstanding role in welcoming refugees from Ukraine and giving them opportunities in their countries, but emphasizing also that people from African descent who are Ukrainian should receive similar opportunities. I would move adoption.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the Amendment 7? No? Mr. Boozer?
This amendment is also something that Ms. Moore raised in the ad hoc committee on migration yesterday, so I think it's a good suggestion and a good amendment, so I agree with it. Thank you.
I shall now put Amendment 7 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Against? Abstentions? Amendment 7 is adopted. Amendment 8, I now call Mr. Krulko from Ukraine to propose Amendment 8 to paragraph 12. Mr. Krulko?
Ukrainian delegation proposed to replace paragraph 12 and put this paragraph in another edition, and condemn the widespread abuse and ill treatment of Ukrainian detainees, torture of prisoners of war committed by the Russian Federation's armed forces and their messengers at war crimes, and further evidence of the Russian Federation's authorities' disregard for the norms and principles of international humanitarian law. So unfortunately, we have a huge amount of detainees and children and adults which forcibly replaced to Russian occupied territory and the territory controlled by Russian. So we ask to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 8? What is the opinion of the rapporteur?
I'm willing to accept the replacement, so I agree with the new proposed amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 8 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 8 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting cards? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 8 is adopted. Paragraph 12. We'll now vote on paragraph 12 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions?
Is that an abstention or is he just holding up?
I don't think that's an abstention. Paragraph 12 as amended is agreed. We now take paragraphs 13 and 14 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? No one? So we take paragraphs 13 and 14 together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 13 and 14 are agreed. Now I call Ms. Potuchkova from the Czech Republic to propose Amendment 9 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, I would like to explain the reasons that led me to propose this amendment. The Czech Republic experienced 40 years of totalitarianism, a regime in which it was impossible to express one's views freely, and any expression of opposition to the government was punishable by imprisonment or other sanction. I'm talking about writers, journalists, and all those brave people who were not afraid to express their opposition to the regime, sometimes at great cost. They played a major role in that period. These so-called dissidents were helped by support and assistance from abroad, including from Canada. The same is now happening in Russia and Belarus, and that is why I consider it extremely important to support and motivate all those who will find the courage to express themselves freely and clearly by writing and speaking out about the evil and injustice that is currently taking place in their homes.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 9? No. Mr. Boozer?
I agree with the amendment.
I shall now put Amendment 9 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your cards? Any abstentions? Amendment 9 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 15. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 15 is agreed. I call now Ms. Bartusz from Poland to propose Amendment 10 to paragraph 16.
Mr. Chair, the purpose of the amendment is to make the resolution more accurate. Deporting Ukrainians and children is horrific. Children were sent to camps in Crimea, Russia, and to Belarus. The Belarusian regime should also be held accountable. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 10? Mr. Boozer?
I agree with the amendment from Ms. Bartusz.
I shall now put Amendment 10 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 10 please raise your cards? Will all those against Amendment 10 please raise your cards? Any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 10 is adopted. I call Ms. Jackson-Lee from the United States to propose Amendment 11 to paragraph 16. The amendment was to the original text. If adopted, this amendment would replace the text added by the second part of Amendment 10. Ms. Jackson-Lee? Is there someone else from the U.S. delegation who wishes to speak on her behalf?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Joe Wilson from South Carolina. And ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians, the disgusting illegal conduct of war criminal Putin's troops in Ukraine demonstrated a disturbing pattern consistent with multiple definitions of genocide outlawed in the 1948 Genocide Convention. The overwhelming evidence of intent by the country's political leadership raises significant concerns, as even meeting one of the convention's multiple criteria is enough to establish the existence of genocide. It's with deep regret that we acknowledge the deep and undeniable evidence indicating that the Russian Federation's actions fit the definition of genocide as outlined in the 1948 Convention. Given the magnitude of these crimes, it's crucial for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to raise its voices, condemn these atrocities, and label them for what they truly are. I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 11? Mr. Rapporteur?
I agree.
Thank you. I now put the Amendment 11 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 11 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 16 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 16 as amended is agreed. Paragraph 17 to 18, we'll now take them together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of those paragraphs? No? So we take them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 17 and 18 are agreed. I now call Mr. Haidu from Romania to propose Amendment 12 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 18.
Dear colleagues, we must emphasize to the Russian Federation its obligation to pay for the damages caused by its war of aggression through international initiatives led by the OSCE participating states. Ever since the start of Russia's illegal, unjustified and unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine, the international community has invested significantly in the means provided by international law. The perpetrators of the most heinous crimes committed during this war must be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 12? Mr. Buser, your opinion?
I agree with the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 12 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 12 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Any abstentions? Amendment 12 is adopted. Amendment 13. Now I call Mr. Leconte from France to propose Amendment 13 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 18 and after the paragraph just inserted by Amendment 12. Mr. Leconte?
Monsieur Leconte étant absent, je vais défendre pour lui. Donc cet amendement vise à mettre au cœur de la lutte contre l'impunité un nouveau système de responsabilité et demande à l'OSCE d'adapter, aux membres de l'OSCE, d'adapter leur législation nationale pour que les mandats d'arrêt délivrés par la Cour pénale soient suivis d'effet sur leur territoire, et ensuite demande aux États membres d'adhérer au statut de Rome, instrument fondateur de la Cour pénale internationale.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 13? No? Mr. Buser?
I agree with the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 13 is adopted. We will now take paragraph 19 to 21 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? No? So we'll take them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Thank you. Paragraphs 19 to 21 are agreed.
22.
Now we take paragraph 22. I'll pass the chairmanship for...
Agree, paragraphs 19 to 22.
21. I'll pass the chairmanship for a short while to Ms. Farah Karimi, who is the deputy chair of the committee.
Thank you very much. Mr. An oral amendment has been proposed that, and I think Mr. Samakharadze, you want to introduce that.
Yes, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, as you know, Georgia was the first country, the victim of Russian aggression. So we believe that in the resolution, this fact should be underlined, and this should be reflected in a stronger way. Therefore, I propose to add after the existing paragraph 21 a new paragraph which says that condemns the deteriorated humanitarian and human rights situation in Georgia's regions of Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region occupied by the Russian Federation as a result of violations of fundamental freedoms and human rights of people living therein, various forms of discrimination against ethnic Georgians, as well as the obliteration and alteration of Georgian features from Georgian cultural heritage monuments in both regions as a direct consequence of Russia's ongoing occupation and Russification policy.
Thank you very much. In accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, first I will ask whether there is any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there is any objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it falls. Any objection against introducing the new amendment? I don't see any objection. We will proceed to consider the amendment in the same way as other amendments, that we will hear from the proposer of the oral amendment, one speaker against the oral amendment, and the opinion of the rapporteur, and we will decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the oral amendment. Mr. Samakharadze, do you want to add anything to what you already said?
No, I have already outlined the main idea.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No? I don't see anyone. Mr. Boozer, what is your comment on that?
I agree with the proposed amendment from Mr. Samakharadze.
Good, then I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment vote? Thank you very much. Will all those against please raise their voting cards? I don't see any. Are there any, sorry, there is one, yes. Are there any abstentions? No. The oral amendment is adopted. Thank you. Now yeah, that's it. Then I will pass actually the chairmanship to I guess I should put actually the whole paragraph 22 now into vote. We didn't actually exercise this before coming here, so I'm so sorry. Those in favor of the paragraph 22 as amended, please raise your vote. Thank you very much. Those against, raise your votes. Any abstentions? No. Paragraph 22 as amended is adopted. Now I pass the chairmanship to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now want to, during the process of the resolution and the report, I've decided not to mention specific countries in my text that much, with the exceptions, of course, with Russia, Ukraine. I've been mentioning also, as you have seen, Georgia, and now we have we accepted the oral amendment from Mr. Samakharadze. I've also mentioned, as you can see in the text, Armenia and Azerbaijan due to the human rights situation in the area and also the ongoing conflict there. During this summer meeting, I've been having discussions with both delegations from Armenia and Azerbaijan, trying to find a text that we can agree upon together. Unfortunately, it was not the case, but I still have an oral amendment, and I've discussed with both the delegation and tried to find a compromise compromise, but we'll see what happens. But I will now read my suggested compromise as an oral amendment, and it's up to the Assembly if you accept it or not. And you will see it now on the screen, and can I read it, Mr. Chair? Thank you. My suggestion as a rapporteur for a new paragraph after paragraph 22 reads as following, calls for a full and speedy resolution of all outstanding humanitarian issues in the Nagorno-Karabakh peace process, including ensuring free flow of people and commerce through the Lachin corridor, and welcomes diplomatic efforts aiming at facilitating dialogue and building confidence and trust between Armenia and Azerbaijan, including the recent negotiations between foreign ministers of both countries in the United States, expressing sincere hope that dialogue will also result in an improved situation on the ground. So that is my oral amendment, and I now leave it to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. An oral amendment has been proposed that you have just heard in accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure. First, I will ask whether there is any objection to the oral amendment being considered. There is one objection from Azerbaijan. This means that we cannot consider the amendment. Now we go to Amendment 14. I call Ms. Karapetyan from Armenia to propose Amendment 14 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 22.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to underline that the Armenian delegation acknowledges and thanks the rapporteur, Mr. Johan Büser, for the efforts he has made. And if the previous amendment was put to vote, if there was no objection, the Armenian delegation would vote in favor of the language that the rapporteur just suggested to the Parliamentary Assembly. Since it didn't happen, we are now looking at Amendment 14. And I would like to start by thanking all of the parliamentarians that have supported this amendment with their signature so that we can discuss it in this plenary. And let me summarize what this amendment actually proposes. It is about resolving humanitarian issues in our context. Namely, it calls for the free flow of people and commerce through the Lachin corridor. It calls for the return of all detainees, and it also calls for the protection of the cultural heritage in the region. And I would like to ask the members of this committee to support this amendment with their positive vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 14? Azerbaijan, Mr. Azay Guliev.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first clarify why I objected the first one that was put by our distinguished rapporteur as an oral amendment. I could have agreed, but there was a very wrong wording saying that Nagorno-Karabakh peace process. As you know, there is no Nagorno-Karabakh peace process. There is a peace process going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan. If we would have called like the normalization process or interstate relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it would be right, wording. This is why I want to make clarification why I oppose that. Coming to the Amendment 14, again, I said that the draft paragraph already sufficiently covers the subject matter and calls for increased efforts to address the challenges faced by the victims of wars and long-lasting impacts that conflicts had on population. Dear colleagues, as you know that the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan just concluded the next round of negotiations on peace treaty in Washington, D.C. this week, facilitated by U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. Both sides and Secretary Blinken reported on progress in drafting of the peace treaty. All this critical juncture, the OECD participating states and we as parliamentarians should approach the situation with utmost care and not to jeopardize the sensitive and fragile peace process. The unilateral amendments proposed by Armenian delegation prejudges the outcomes of the bilateral negotiations on the peace treaty and contain unfounded allegations against Azerbaijan. that do not serve the purpose of building confidence and trust, but raise tensions and divert the attention of the Assembly from the key objects. I really count on the political wisdom of our distinguished colleagues and call the Assembly to keep the original text and vote against this proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Buzzer, what is your opinion of the amendment?
Well, my opinion was to accept my oral amendment, but now it has been rejected, so I don't have any recommendation. I leave this to the voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I shall put Amendment 14 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 14 please raise your cards? Will those against please raise your cards? Any abstentions? Amendment 14 is adopted. We'll now take paragraphs 23 to 25 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 23 to 25 are agreed. I now call Ms. Potuchkova from Czech Republic to propose Amendment 15 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 25.
Dear colleagues, I am a woman and a mother, and also a politician, and even though my children are already teenagers, it is sometimes extremely difficult to reconcile all the challenges that my profession, but also my role as a parent brings so that my family can continue to support me and I can support my family. This is why I, together with my two colleagues, established a small group in our parliament, the task of which is to change the rules of procedure in a way that is already a standard in many neighboring countries and which could result in a much more foreseeable schedule for deputies and employees of the parliament. So far, our work of legislators has not been effective as it could be. And I, as a woman, hate time wasting and ineffectiveness. We have received many inspiring ideas on how to adjust the atmosphere in our parliament to create a much more welcoming environment for women politicians. I think that any initiative like this is really important for parents in general, so that all segments of society could be fairly represented in a political decision-making. Thank you for supporting my amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 15? Mr. Buzzer?
I agree with the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 15 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your cards? Abstentions? Amendment 15 is adopted. We'll now take paragraphs 26 to 27 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? So we take them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Thank you. Paragraphs 26 to 27 are agreed. I call now Mr. de Mesmaeker from Belgium to propose Amendment 16 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 27.
Yes, thank you. This amendment, colleagues, wants to address a concerning trend emerging as oppressive governments apparently are able to utilize AML CFT loopholes to quickly and cost-effectively target their critics. For instance, one simple method they use is to produce negative media coverage themselves through their propaganda channels, which is sufficient to be red flagged by automated systems used by banks for compliance. And this leads to the closure of bank accounts or freezing of assets of targeted NGOs or human rights defenders and other individuals, which effectively prevents them from conducting their human rights activity and participating in economic and social life. And the impact is really far-reaching, as thousands of the most vulnerable people worldwide are affected. At the same time, we see that civil society is growingly using crypto assets, and regulations are on their way and they're very necessary, but also there we have to see that we secure and that we maintain their secure and effective use for benevolent purposes. For instance, humanitarian aid to, in this context, to Ukraine, for instance, where it is used extensively. So this amendment wants to address that, as you have read. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 16? No. Mr. Boozer, your opinion?
I agree with the amendment from Mr. de Mesmaeker.
I shall now put Amendment 16 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? Amendment 16 is adopted. Amendment 17, I call Ms. Sparks from the United States to propose Amendment 17 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 27 and after the paragraph that was just inserted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we know, strength of democratic institutions is fundamental for survival of the values and principles this organization is chartered to protect. And so this is a very simple amendment. It actually expresses significant concerns with the democratic backsliding. But I also hope in the future our institution will also be able to work to help to strengthen some of the institutions. But I think we need to acknowledge it because this is very important and very concerning. If we want to have strong security, we want to make sure that our member state also have strong democratic institutions to protect principles and values that a lot of people are fighting and dying for, and a lot of people died for through centuries. So I think this is very important, and I hope my colleagues will support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Boozer?
I agree with the amendment from Ms. Potts.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Will all those against please raise your cards? Any abstentions? Amendment 17 is adopted. We now take paragraphs 28 to 30 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of those paragraphs? We're taking them together. Anyone against? In favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 28 to 30 are agreed. I call Mr. Demy from France to propose Amendment 18 to paragraph 31.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Cet amendement a pour objectif de prendre en compte les difficultés spécifiques auxquelles font face les habitants des zones rurales et reculées pour accéder aux processus électoraux Les listes électorales, nous le savons, dépendent d'une base de données d'identité nationale fiable. Or, les habitants de zones rurales et reculées ne détiennent pas toujours un titre d'identité à jour, compte tenu de leurs difficultés d'accès aux services publics, parfois faute de transport, parfois faute d'accès à Internet. De nombreux pays ont déjà œuvré pour répondre à ce problème, par exemple avec la mise en place de bureaux d'inscription itinérants dans des zones rurales. Donc cet amendement a tout simplement pour objectif de rappeler les difficultés auxquelles sont confrontés les habitants des zones rurales et reculées pour accéder aux processus électoraux. C'est donc un amendement d'appel.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Boozer, your opinion?
I agree with the amendment from Mr. Demily.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 18 to the votes. Will all those in favor of Amendment 18 please raise your cards? Thank you. All those against? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 18 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 31 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 31 as amended is agreed. We now take paragraphs 32 to 34 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? We take them together then. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 32 to 34 are agreed. I come now to Amendment 19, and I call Ms. Sachs from Canada to propose Amendment 19 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 34.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues who are here today and for the consideration of my draft amendment. It builds on the preceding paragraphs addressing the weakening faith in political and democratic processes that we are seeing throughout Europe and across the globe. Specifically, the amendment would add a paragraph to the resolution urging OSCE participant states to increase their engagement in the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism, known as RRM. Its primary aim was to strengthen coordination between G7 countries and the European Union in responding to foreign threats to democracy. Colleagues, we're operating in a global environment while hostile actors such as Russia are working to spread disinformation and propaganda aimed at sowing discord among allies and undermining the public's faith in democracy. The RM supports collaboration in creating mechanisms for governments to build knowledge, capacity to counter foreign threats to democracy, including by developing common data analytical tools. While many OSCE participating states already collaborate with the RRM by virtue of their membership in the G7 or the European Union, this amendment would encourage broader and more formalized engagement with the mechanism. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues. I hope you consider it.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Boozer, your opinion?
I agree with the amendment from Ms. Sachs.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 19 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? Amendment 19 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 35. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 35 is agreed. Amendment 20, I call now Mr. Areni from Andorra to propose Amendment 20 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 35.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Diversity and inclusion are core values that underpin the Helsinki principles we hold dear. We cannot uphold our commitments to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms and accord equal rights to all peoples without recognizing and embracing the ethnic and racial diversity of our societies across the OCE area. For some of our countries, as in the United States and Andorra, this recognition was the result of a long, difficult, and ongoing struggle for civil rights. In recent decades, migration has increased ethnic and racial diversity in almost every OCE participating state. We must ensure that these migrant populations are fully welcome, included, and empowered in our societies, not excluded and ostracized. Minority rights are not reserved only for national minorities. Ethnic and racial minorities are likewise entitled to equality before the law and must be accorded full opportunity for the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? The opinion from the rapporteur.
I agree with the amendment.
I shall now put Amendment 20 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Against? Abstentions? Amendment 20 is adopted. Amendment 21, and I call Ms. Bartusz from Poland to propose Amendment 21 to paragraph 36.
Thank you. The term sexual orientation is used quite often on human rights forums and as a rule is not problematic. But here it seems to be too far. The UN declaration does not mention sexual orientation. Therefore, it seems reasonable to leave out the term sexual orientation, not to create a new catalog. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak? Canada?
Thank you. Colleagues, I'd like to bring to attention an administrative error. My name appeared in support of this resolution, but the removal of sexual orientation is against my personal values, those of our government, and those of Canada. And therefore, I strongly encourage members to vote against this resolution, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair,
yes,
I
please.
ask for the floor, please.
Yes.
I'm from the Netherlands, and I would like to say that human rights are not a menu in a restaurant. You cannot pick and choose and leave out one human rights because you don't like it or because you think it's wrong. Article 21 of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union specifically also includes sexual orientation as ground to be protected. Unfortunately, I see that the amendment is being proposed by the Polish delegation. On April 21st, the appeals court in the Polish city of Białystok also supported the rights of LGBT citizens in Poland against those cities that declared themselves an LGBT-free zone. So, in conclusion, I implore every delegation here to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now hear the opinion of the rapporteur.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the discussion. If you've read my report as well as the resolution, you can see that I, as a rapporteur, is very worried about the situation and the attacks on the LGBTQI community. So, and I also would like to quote Dr. Hedy Fry the other day when she said that if you really want human rights for all, you also must include the minorities. And I think that we cannot leave a minority out. We must include all minorities, and LGBTQI people needs this, that we stand up for them, and I think we should do so also in this resolution, and that is why I also encourage the Assembly to reject the proposed amendment from Ms. Bartusz. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I shall put Amendment 21 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 21 please raise your cards?
Who's the second one? Okay, two in favor.
Will all those against please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 21 is defeated. We'll now vote on paragraph 36 as amended.
No, it was not amended.
Not amended? Okay, we'll now on the original paragraph 36, not amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 36 is agreed. We'll now take paragraphs 37 to 38 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? No? Then we take them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 37 to 38 are agreed. Now we have amendment number 22. I call Ms. Friedel from Switzerland to propose amendment 22 to paragraph 39.
Herr Vorsitzender, Herr Berichterstatter, es geht hier darum, die rechtliche Verankerung des vorgeschlagenen Absatzes zu stärken, weil er so wichtig ist. Tatsächlich bleibt der Begriff der modernen Form der Sklaverei ziemlich vage. Das Verbot des Menschenhandels ist in der Palermo-Konvention der Vereinten Nationen festgehalten. Gemäß Artikel 3 dieses Übereinkommens ist die internationale Definition des Menschenhandels noch deutlich weitergehend als der Begriff der modernen Form der Sklaverei. In diesem Sinne schlage ich Ihnen vor, dass wir uns auf den Begriff der schweren Menschenrechtsverletzung beziehen, was der internationalen Definition dieses Verbrechens besser entspricht.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against amendment 22? Mr. Boozer?
The amendment is okay with me, thank you.
I shall now put amendment 22 to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your cards? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 22 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 39 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Abstentions. Paragraph 39 as amended is agreed. We'll now take paragraphs 40 to 42 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? Oh, so we're taking them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraphs 40 to 42 are agreed. We come now to amendment number 23, and I call Mr. Harris from the United States to propose amendment 23 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 42.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, online and offline, is essential for a democratic society. This applies to ideas and information with which we disagree, and even which might be considered offensive, shocking, or disturbing. The Internet is a vital platform for individuals to express their opinions, share ideas, and engage in public discourse. Upholding freedom of expression online allows individuals and organizations to participate actively in shaping their societies and in holding governments accountable. By safeguarding the right to express diverse perspectives, even those that challenge prevailing norms, a democratic society can cultivate tolerance in the pursuit of truth. Protecting freedom of expression on the internet is essential to ensure the democratic ideals of transparency, accountability, and respect for human rights flourish in the digital age. So I move the amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment 23? We will now hear from the rapporteur.
I agree.
I shall now put amendment 23 to the vote. Will all those in favor of amendment 23 please raise your cards? Thank you. Will all those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 23 is adopted. We now take paragraphs 43 to 47 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? We're taking them together. Anyone against? Those in favor? Thank you. Abstentions? Paragraphs 43 to 47 are agreed. Amendment number 24, I call Ms. Gerashenko from Ukraine to propose amendment 24 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 47.
Dear colleagues, 8 years Russia used fake news and propaganda in this hybrid war. Russia used Russia Today and different TV channels in this hybrid war. And my amendment calls on the Russian Federation to uphold its international and OSCE commitments regarding media freedom and the safety of journalists, and to cease the spreading of disinformation and propaganda of war, and hearted the Russian Federation used as one of the hybrid instruments in its war of aggression against Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to speak against the amendment? Mr. Boozer?
I agree with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I put the amendment to the vote. Will all those in favor please raise your cards? Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? Amendment 24 is adopted. And we now vote on paragraph 48. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 48 is agreed. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you very much. I propose now that we formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise your cards. Thank you. Would those against please raise your cards? Abstentions? The draft resolution is adopted. Dear friends, thank you very much for your efforts, for your interventions. I think we were very time effective as well. We have just more than 5 minutes left. I propose we close this session now because we will not be able to start considering the supplementary items. Therefore, we'll continue our consideration of the supplementary items this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much.